بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد, we are in our series of talking about or reflecting on the scholars, the Islamic scholars of Somalia, the early scholars and their impact and their influences and their way of life and the work, some of the work that they did. Obviously, we can't dive too deep into this, so we'll just try to be brief. So amongst the scholars of Somalia includes a sheikh that is very dear to me, that is also happens to be my grandfather. His name is Sheikh Cabdullaahi Casir. Sheikh Cabdullaahi Casir was born in Al-Er, North Mareg, near the Indian Ocean. It is a district of Galgaduud, right? The sheikh was born in 1913 and passed away in 1975. So Sheikh Cabdullaahi Casir dedicated his entire life to three things. I mean, you could describe it in three chapters. One was seeking the sacred knowledge. Two was acting upon that sacred Islamic knowledge. And three was teaching that knowledge, right? In one of his oral recollection that people have is that he said that in Somalia or in Mogadishu, there is not a kitab, Islamic book, right, that teaches the Islamic sacred knowledge that he did not read or that he did not hear somebody else read it out loud. So that shows you that his days and nights and his occupation was just to study the sacred knowledge and to teach it, right? So Sheikh Cabdullaahi Casir studied the Sharia. Obviously, he spent a lot of time studying the Islamic Sharia, but he also was dedicated and involved in the ilm of tasawwuf, right? And he had multiple ijazas for the spiritual path. On one hand, when obviously the sheikh, when he was young and he lived in Al-Er, his father passed away. So he spent a great deal of his childhood serving his family. So that's khidmah, right? He's serving his mom. He's trying to put bread on the table. He's herding cattle and so on, right? And then when he was in his teenage years, he was given permission to by his mother to go seek Islamic sciences, the Islamic knowledge, right? And his first journey, I guess, was to Johar. He came to Johar, and in that city, there was a sheikh named Sheikh Muhammad Uthman, also known as Sheikh Oyaye, who was a disciple, who was a student of Sheikh Wais bin Ahmed al-Qadri, right? And Sheikh Oyaye was not just a mudarris sheikh, but he was a spiritual murshid. He was a spiritual guide, right? And he had a zawiyah over there, and he was giving people the spiritual path of Qadriya, and he was really focused on the purification of the self, just as he inherited from his sheikh, who inherited from his sheikh, and so on, right? That followed that sanad. So when he went to, he spent 4 years with Sheikh Oyaye, and later on, you know, he would get the ijazah from Sheikh Oyaye, the ijazah of Qadriya from Sheikh Oyaye, and Sheikh Oyaye would transfer him to under the supervision of Sheikh Hilole. And Sheikh Hilole, Sheikh Cabdullaahi Casir would spend a greater even time with Sheikh Hilole in learning the spiritual path and acting upon the Islamic knowledge and purifying the nafs, purifying the soul, and developing good character, right? So Sheikh Cabdullaahi Casir also focused on the Islamic Sharia, and he learned a great deal of knowledge. He spent from many scholars. I mean, the most famous scholars in the region at that time, he sat with them and he learned from them. Amongst them includes Sheikh Muhammad Faqih Yusuf. It includes Sheikh Abdurrahman Umar, known as Sheikh Abd Umar. Also includes Sheikh Hussein Muhammad Mahmoud. Also including Sheikh Abdul Majid, Sheikh Muhammad, Sheikh Abdurrahman Sufi, known as Sheikh Ade, and so on, right? He also sat with and studied in the circles of sheikhs like Sheikh Ali Ambar and Sheikh Hussein Ade and so on. May Allah be pleased with them all. Sheikh Cabdullaahi Casir also had some influences when it comes to spirituality from great sheikhs, including Sheikh Sha'ir, Sheikh Wais, who is the son of Sheikh Wes bin Ahmed al-Qadri, right? So the Sheikh's character, as told to us by his students, his relatives, is that he was a very generous, kind, gentle man, right? And that he would be like when people came, so in, like if you know something about Somalia, Mogadishu is a city, right? And a lot of people live in this Bedouin sort of life outside of Mogadishu, and it's called the Badia life, right? When people came to Mogadishu that are his relatives or his kin, he would welcome them and he would host them in his house. So he's very generous and kind to the relatives. He was kind to his neighbors and the people that were in need, right? He was also very, he was down to earth in modern day words, right? He was not a sheikh that was outside of his students. Like, he was with his students, he sat with them. And some of his students even tell us that he would cook for them, right? And he would take walks with them. So his teaching was not just from book to book, but it was very experiential teaching, right? Very reflective, day to day, very active. And these are the methods of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The companions of the prophets did not just, the Prophet didn't just preach to them. That's not how they learned, but they learned through suhbah, right? And through walking with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is what some of the ulama of Somalia, some of the ulama of Tasawwuf also do, is that suhbah program of being active in learning. And learning, it doesn't just happen through books, but it happens through experience, right? So Sheikh Abdullah Casir was very God-conscious man, right? And he transferred that to his students, right? In the sense that he did not preach something that he did not practice. He was very keen in following that ilm and amal, right? That focus of that connection. So, and when that usually happens, and we know that in our tradition that people often, you have impact on people, you have influence on people when you practice what you preach. So Sheikh Abdullah Casir was amongst those very influential scholars that developed great minds within Somalia, within Mogadishu, and his knowledge scope included the Sharia, it included the Arabic grammar, including the Nahwa, and he learned from different scholars, and it also included the Islamic spirituality, which is known as the ilm tasawwuf, right? So he left a legacy of students, of family members that continue to remember him and reflect on his life and remember how he lived on this earth was through being a generous, kind, merciful soul. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive him and to widen his grave for him and to forgive all of his sins and to admit him in the highest place in Jannah, inshallah. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us to be benefited through studying his life. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.